evening. I call to order this August 7th meeting of the Winston-Salem City Council and ask the City Secretary to call the roll, please.
Councilman Larson.
Present.
Councilman Clark.
Here.
Councilman
Here.
Councilman Montgomery.
Here.
Councilman Burke. Here. Councilman Adams. Here. Councilman McIntosh.
Here.
Councilman Patton.
Present.
Thank you. Would you please join the City Council and me in a moment of silence? Thank you. And would you join the City Council and me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our Sergeant at Arms tonight is Lieutenant Krista Long. Lieutenant, thank you for being with us tonight. May we have the first item, please?
Presentation of the Community Appearance Commission Annual Report.
I recognize Wendy Hartup, who is the chair of the committee. If Hartup, you would give us the annual presentation, annual report.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
So y'all should have a copy of the report. It's in the usual format that y'all usually get it. Some of the things that I want to just highlight was that we had a very successful, again, always seem to, for Roots Day. Had about 275 trees planted within the Boston Thurman neighborhood last year. And we've been having a little bit of trouble this year finding some good spots. We tried to do one on Watown and Motor Road, and all of those had some issues with the state, or Motor Road we had a problem with some lines that need to be done. So our final place we've picked for the 25th anniversary of Roots Day is the Bridgeport neighborhood on Little Creek by the behind the rec center. That area, I think that's your ward, Mr. Bessie. And also, this is a Tree City USA of the Year for North Carolina by the National Arbor Day Foundation folks. So we are pretty proud of that Roots Day. And it being our 25th year, and that will be October 21st. So hope that y'all can attend. We met for the Technical Advisory and Project Review and Committee, the TAPR. We reviewed about 7 different projects this past year, including the renovation of Union Station, New Conoak Elementary, and Lawrence Paisley Schools. So those were some of the ones that were included within that, and we really enjoyed being able to see some really great improvements to some of those areas of the community. So it'll be really exciting once those start to go in and we can take some tours of them. But I just wanted to mention that as part of our interlocal agreement, that we would be sending our comments that we have, so you can just see what things we might say that we thought maybe the city could use to save money, or just so you can see that we have really positive comments from the Community Appearance Commission. And then lastly, the last point I was just going to point out is that we also had a very successful Education and Awards meeting this past year. A lot of different folks recognized, and that's all found on the front of the report. And we're working on planning for 2018 for that awards event, which will be held in the spring. So,
thank you. Any questions, Ms. Hartup?
I don't have a question.
Councilman Burke?
Make a comment.
Yes.
I thank you very much. I do believe we have a vacancy on the commission, the appearance.
we might, yes.
And this may be the opportunity
We have
for
2.
someone, too, who's interested to
Good idea.
please let our city secretary know, and we thank you for what you do.
Oh, well, thank you.
Questions? Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the work of the Appearance Commission.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Tonight's agenda of the council is comprised of the following items. We have 3 rezoning petitions, a UDO text amendment, and an item making recommendations for boards and commissions. The rezoning petition and the UDO text amendment are listed as public hearings, and when these hearings are called, persons in the council chamber will be given an opportunity to speak. If there is opposition to the rezoning petitions, the proponents and opponents will be each given 15 minutes for a presentation and then 3 minutes for rebuttal. If no one wishes to speak, I'll close the public hearing and the City Council will consider the item. We're televising this meeting live tonight on TV 13, and it will be replayed on Tuesday at 9 a.m. and again Wednesday at 9 p.m. Of course, members of the public can always get copies of our agenda before the meetings, as well as videos of previous meetings at the city's website, www.cityofws.org, and just click on the Watch Meetings Online option. May we have item number 1, please?
Item Z1, public hearing on zoning petition of Waughtown Cemetery Incorporated from RS9 to IPL, property located on the west side of Light Street between Waughtown Street and Sprague Street, located in the Southeast Ward. Planning Board recommended approval of the petition.
We do have 2 individuals who have signed up to speak in opposition to that, although I think I understand that they're generally in agreement. If just want to make sure some conditions are included in there. Do you still wish to speak, Anderson and Mr. Stoon? Okay, very good. All right. Is anyone else like to be heard on this proposed rezoning? If not, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And Mr. Norby, I'll ask you if you would go ahead and Councilmember Taylor, and get that in the record, make sure that we've got those conditions covered.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. You see the property here shown in yellow. It's on the west side of Light Street and immediately adjacent to, on the east, the IP zone property that you see just to the left of it. And that's the present cemetery. This would be for additional area that would become part of the cemetery, but as we understand from the petitioner, would not be part of any expanded grave sites. This is a look from Light Street. There were some overgrown areas that were cut down. They're in the process of clearing that when this picture was taken. You can see the cemetery in the background. This is looking directly across Light Street at some of the residential properties that are facing that property. And then on the lower right, that's looking north on Light Street toward to the north there. And the site is adjacent to the existing cemetery, which I mentioned. It's already zoned IP next to it. The IPL zoning for a cemetery would be compatible with the surrounding area given that, and this request only includes one use. This went to the planning board on July 13th, and as you saw there was a resident opposing it. Her concern was the appearance and buffering from Light Street there, since the residences are facing it. So that evolved into a discussion between the applicant and the board and the resident. And the applicant agreed after that discussion to install, even though it's not required, a type 2 buffer along Light Street, the Light Street frontage. And that would be staged over 2 time periods. The first stage would be by the end of this year, evergreens that would be along the frontage there, and then over the next year, the trees that would be required as part of the type 2 buffer would have to be installed. So with that, the petitioner agreed, the opponent agreed that satisfied her concerns, and the planning board recommended approval.
With those conditions?
With those conditions.
Any questions from Mr. Norby? Councilmember Adams?
Yes. Who owns the cemetery? I mean, is it a church? Is it a nonprofit? Was it a church that owned it originally, or what?
The petitioner, probably would be best for the petitioner to get up and explain that, but he is one of the 4 trustees for the cemetery.
Oh, okay.
So I believe it is a nonprofit corporation, but he can explain further.
Yes, sir. If you'd come forward and give your name and address for the record, and just give us the details of the ownership, if you would.
I'll tell you what I know. My name is Steve Morgan. I'm one of 2833 Birchwood Drive, Winston-Salem 27103. I am one of 4 volunteer trustees for this cemetery. It is a 501c13 corporation. The best I can tell you, and we're actually working with Wake Forest Community Law, who volunteers their services, as y'all probably know. We're really trying very hard to figure out a long-term plan for this cemetery. The best I can tell you as to who owns it, the people that own it are the people buried there and remaining family members that have. people buried there. We are not owned by a church. It's just a community cemetery that goes back a long, long way. And it's my understanding that if you go back far enough, this was probably part of Molly Light's family land at some point in time.
The cemetery itself, do you know how many graves are in it or plots? And if there are any plots left, are you opening it up to the public? And I know it's a lot of questions. And how many plots do you think you're going to be able to do with the new addition?
I'll answer the last part first. We do not plan to bury anybody
Okay,
on these lots we're purchasing.
okay,
We have purchased these lots strictly to protect the cemetery interest as they exist now. There are over 2,000 graves there, I am told, by people that know more than I know. We probably average right now 6 funerals a year at this cemetery. It is not real active because so many of the folks that have connections there, they're already there. So there's not too many more, to our knowledge, that will be buried there. We're not selling plots. We are volunteer trustees, and we are not knowledgeable enough or have any desire to sell burial plots. Our sole interest, and it's because we 4 trustees all have part of our families buried there. Our sole interest, take care of what's there, maintain it, keep it looking as good as we can keep it looking, and that is why we bought the 3 lots, because the 3 lots had become a dumping ground for litter, vandalism, so on and so forth. So we bought the lots primarily for protection. When we bought the lots, we didn't even know anything about, well, we might need to get this rezoned. The rezoning came about when I got a tax bill. And since we're a 501c13 corporation, we don't pay taxes. So the tax office told me the way you get it off the tax rolls is to get it rezoned from residential, which is really what led to the rezoning request.
well, first
Did
of all.
I answer all your questions?
Yes, you did. First of all, thank you for you all stepping up to be the caretakers of those who have already lived before us that require to be treated with dignity and respect. I thank you for doing that. Thank you so much.
Thank
Councilman
you.
Burke, have a question?
Yes, it's a private, yours is a private cemetery.
I guess technically you would call it a private cemetery, yes.
Because we do have some cemeteries here that the people are not taking care of. And I agree with the councilwoman about wanting to take care of it. And I guess the question to some of us, we are thinking about, we have Evergreen, which is a public one. And we're running out of spaces, but this is the time now, if the city manager could just address, because there are questions about Evergreen that we're not answering. And I agree with taking care. I'm out there often looking at hours, and if somebody don't take care of it and speak up, they will go not the direction you want them to go. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
If I might, I'll have a little side comment. As I mentioned earlier, we're trying to find out long-term who can take care of this cemetery, because I'm the youngest trustee and I'm 68. Wow. So I'm not going to be around forever. So we're trying to figure out what's going to happen when we 4 are no longer around. I met with Scotty Spees, who looks after Evergreen and Woodland, and I have grandparents buried at Woodland. And I went to Scotty Spees one day and I said, we would love to turn this cemetery over to you long term, and I'll hand you the checkbook if you people will take care of it. And he said, we have no interest in doing that. So they got enough to take care of, apparently.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Garrity?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem, yes, Evergreen Cemetery is just about full as far as selling all the plots. Last time I checked, I think we were at less than 10 plots available for sale. Now, there's still a lot of burials that'll be done, but as far as plots to sell, it's pretty much full. We are working with the funeral homes to increase our marketing of Woodland, because there's still quite a few plots available there, And I think at some point, council may want to rediscuss whether we want to look at additional land for a cemetery. As far as Mr. Spees goes, yes, he'll tell you that often private cemeteries will contact the city, and we've worked at length with Oddfellow Cemetery as well as with Happy Hill, but we don't own either one of those. We're trying to help them with their ownership issues as well.
Thank you. No other questions?
I had a question.
Councilmember Clark, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Along those lines, do you have enough money in the bank to keep it up?
The best way I can answer that right now, we have funds to maintain the cemetery and do what we're currently doing. We obviously had money to buy the lots.
Mm-hmm.
We have some money to address the conditions, I think, that were placed on this rezoning, to plant trees, that sort of thing. We have money to pay a landscaping crew to mow and weed eat every week during mowing season.
Yeah.
And he, in fact, is the person that we will use to plant trees and that sort of thing. We have money available. Money does not last forever. The money that we have, to be honest with you, was willed to us by some folks that died over the last probably 20 years. And we have an amount of money sufficient, in my opinion, to probably do what we need to do for the next 10 years.
10 years. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Then
and again,
I
echo Ms.
just-
Adams, thank you for your service. You do this out of the kindness of your heart, not for fiduciary
You're welcome.
or
Thank you.
monetary benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'd recognize Councilmember Taylor. Oh, so Councilmember McIntyre.
I had a question, but it was exactly what.
Okay, Councilmember Taylor.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for your time, Mr. Morgan. I had the opportunity to meet with you to discuss this proposal, so thank you as well.
Yes.
The Walltown Cemetery is a gem in our community. It's been around for a long time. It goes way back. We discussed some issues with vandalism. I know with the district police office just a block or so up, we're working to address that. I want to also take a moment and thank the neighbors for coming out. I think this is exactly what we talk about when we discuss taking more of a governance in what happens in City Hall. So thank you for coming down as well. I'm very confident, Mr. Morgan, in you and the other trustees and your plan to conserve and protect this Walltown Cemetery. If I didn't think so, this is something I'd be standing on the desk and flipping around about. I've been in this community my entire life. The Walltown Cemetery is a fixture. We want to make sure we continue to preserve this particular fixture. So thank you for what you do. Mayor, members of the council, I hereby move for approval of W-333 and number 2, the statement of consistency for approval of said item.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah. Well, we've got a motion should be coming up here.
We've taken a month off, and I've had to get
There
used
we
to
go.
it, so we're back to it.
Well, okay. We'll show it as Councilmember Larson is
I'll second that.
moving it and second by Councilmember Clark. All those in favor of this motion, please indicate by voting yes. Any opposed, indicate by voting no. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you
Thank you,
very
Mayor.
much. Okay, item number 2.
Item 2. Public hearing on zoning petition of Stephen Craver, trustee for the Trust of Zula, Craver, from RS9 to GVS, property located on the southwest corner of Clemmonsville Road and Conoak Drive, located in the southeast ward. Item continued from the June 5th, 2017 City Council meeting.
We'll have a public hearing on this item for the proponents. Jennifer Bucardo, please. We have 15 minutes. If you state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Jennifer Bucardo, 2214 Cole Road. Do you mind exiting out of this one? I have a...
We're trying to show. Okay. There you go.
Okay. I'm here on behalf of Azam Properties. This is located on the corner of Clemmonsville Road and Conoak Drive. The property is 300 West Clemmonsville Road, and it was built in 1947. It was built as a service station and as a gas station. The structure still allows it to be a service station, as you guys can see up at the, I don't know, you guys have computers? Okay. Currently, that is a major thoroughfare road, which connects the streets West Clemmonsville Road and South Main, West Clemmonsville Road and Old Salisbury, and Stratford Village and Peter Chris Parkway. And it's 0.2 miles away from the US 52. So concerns about the traffic, there's already traffic there. So as far as increasing traffic, it would not be increasing traffic. Let's see. City of Innovation, Winston-Salem, right? This is a major thoroughfare road. This is one of the major roads that our citizens see on a daily basis, and also one of the roads that are seen by the people who do not reside here. So currently, this is what the lot looks like. It's that's how it looks like right now, and as far as we are concerned, Assam Properties is more than willing to invest in this property in order to make it aesthetically pleasing to the city and to the people who visit our city. The planning board passed it because the 2030 legacy encourages the development and reuse of existing sites and buildings that is compatible with the surrounding area, and promotes quality design that infill does not negatively impact the surrounding development. The South Suburban plan also states that the property is recommended to be rezoned to a special use zoning district to enable conditions to be added to help improve the compatibility of the property and the adjacent residential uses. It also added do not expand any non-residential zoning to the adjacent properties. There were several requirements by the planning board, and that is a type 3 buffer yard and expand of the sidewalk and new front parking area. And we lost some space when we flushed the parking with the building. So other conditions were signs. The signs, there was going to be no signs. If any signs, they're going to be on the building themselves. There's going to be no vehicle storage. The GPS is limited only to this use. And it's basically a Jiffy Lube kind of thing we're going to try and do. So it's something we're going to get cars in and we're going to get them out. We're not storing anything else. Assam Properties has followed all recommendations and conditions that have been set by the planning board. And all the changes requested by the city have cost Assam Properties close to $14,000 in just modifications of plans and site surveys. So Assam Properties has been more than willing to cooperate in bringing jobs to the city and making the city of arts and innovation aesthetically pleasing to the citizens and the non-citizens throughout the road. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Any questions? No questions at the time. Thank you. Anyone else like to be heard for the proponents? Yes. Mr. Elamine.
Mayor Jones, distinguished members of the board, I'm Fleming Elamine, speaking as a private citizen, if I may. I spent a career at Glenn High School, as you know. Azam was one of my former students. So I'm speaking as a character witness on what I've seen him develop into as a young entrepreneur in this city and be willing to give back. This is my native home also. Born in 1952, KW Reynolds Hospital. I love my town. And I think he's an asset. His effort to improve that community, I think, will be an asset also. And I strongly encourage you to give him full consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Elamine. Anyone else like to be heard on the proponent side? All right, seeing no one, we'll move over to the opponents. First, Carolyn Highsmith.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Highsmith. I live at 3335 Anderson Drive, 27127. I am here this evening on behalf of the Conoak Hills Community Association in opposition to the petitioner's request for rezoning 300 West Clemmonsville Road from residential to general business special use to permit the opening of a Jiffy Lube type of motor vehicle repair and maintenance business, which would create a high-intensity, high-traffic spot zoning commercial entity in a residential area. This type of business is way too intense to be directly across from the main entrance to the Conoak Hills community and will negatively impact the surrounding residential homes and neighborhood area. The opposition is so intense that a neighborhood petition with 212 signatures was presented to the Planning Board in April 2017, and since then we've added additional signatures for a grand total of 240 petition signatures. Plus, we had an overwhelming neighborhood turnout on June 22nd at our second neighborhood zoning meeting, requested by Council Member James Taylor. Here are the main reasons we are opposing this zoning petition. Number one, the proposed general business zoning is way too intense a zoning for maintaining a residential look and feel from South Main Street to Peters Creek Parkway. The newly revised South Suburban Area Plan update is recommending that all future uses of the old Conoak Texaco property should only be rezoned to a low-intensity commercial or office zoning district. An auto repair business is not considered a low-intensity commercial business, nor does it reflect the aesthetics of a residential neighborhood. The petitioner's attempt to get this non-conforming property grandfathered in is not a justifiable reason to rezone and doesn't reflect the future uses of this property as outlined in the newly revised South Suburban Area Plan update. Number two, since this property has been vacant for at least the past 5 years, it has officially reverted back to its correct residential zoning. It previously operated as a non-conforming gas station in a residential area. However, the West Clemmonsville Road expansion project permanently changed the look of this corner lot when about one-half of its frontage became part of this expansion project, and its gas tanks were permanently removed. As such, neighbors no longer view this property as a suitable site for an auto repair business, especially given the oversaturation of automotive businesses within 500 feet and within 1/4 mile of this property. Number three, the site is now designated as a huge risk hazardous waste site. During the removal of the gas tanks, it was discovered that fuel products had been leaking from a defective pipe for who knows how many years. Some initial site cleanup was performed, but additional remediation is still required by the state to permanently clean up this site. As such, this is a high-risk hazardous waste site where the groundwater is contaminated to such an extent that no residential activity will currently be permitted until the contamination levels decrease to acceptable levels for residential activity. The contaminants in the soil were so toxic that they have killed all the shrubbery on the back of the property. Number four, the properly residentially zoned second lot on the west side of this property that has been added to the zoning petition has never been part of the old Texaco property and as such should never have been permitted to become part of the zoning petition. Properly zoned property should not be included in zoning petitions trying to grandfather in non-conforming property such as the Conoak Texaco. This would be setting up a really bad precedent in future such zoning cases. In conclusion, the Conoak Hills community and surrounding neighborhood areas are respectfully asking the City Council to protect our neighborhood from a high-intensity and high-traffic commercial business at 300 West Clemmonsville Road by voting not to approve this zoning case. Thank you.
Thank you. Hazel Watson?
Good evening. My name is Hazel Watson. I live at 3136 Anderson Drive in Winston-Salem, 27127. I am speaking in opposition to the request for rezoning of the property at 300 West Clemmonsville Road to general business. It is important to our community to maintain the residential character of our neighborhood. The petitioner has requested GB zoning and plans to operate an auto repair shop. The petitioner has also indicated a plan to use the adjoining property, which has always been zoned residential, as an area to extend parking or to make other use for the business. We are opposed to rezoning what was the non-conforming property, and we are also definitely opposed to any change in the zoning of the adjacent property, which has always been residential. If the petitioner receives general business rezoning for the non-conforming property and operates an auto repair share, traffic issues would be greatly increased. There is already a very busy intersection, and having vehicles entering and leaving the business frequently would make the problem worse, especially since the entrances to the property will be very close to the intersection and stoplight. We already have numerous auto repair shops in this area, and we do not need another business of this kind. Another very important concern is that this property is contaminated by leaks from the previous underground gas tanks. According to the evaluations of the site by the Environmental Quality Agency, remediation has been in progress and a significant amount of soil was removed and replaced. However, this did not totally resolve the problem. To totally resolve the problem, there would need to be additional removal and replacement of contaminated soil. And test wells have revealed that the groundwater has been contaminated. Wells were tested and new wells were drilled to enable an assessment of the extent of contamination and danger to neighboring homes, wells, and groundwater. The studies have also revealed that there continues to be unacceptable amounts of dangerous chemicals in the water, and it has plumed significantly south from the location. It is great concern that an auto repair shop might add further contamination to the site. Although they might only be doing oil changes or replacing auto parts, the vehicles are likely to leak similar petroleum products, and over time this could increase rather than decrease to remediate the contamination. At this time, the contamination remains significant enough that a residence could not be built there. We would like to see this property fully remediated so that the neighbors and properties in creeks and wells, particularly to the south of the property, will not experience further contamination or create additional danger for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Jesse Adams.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I'd like to, first of all, thank you
Please
for
state
allowing...
your name and
Oh, I'm
address for the
sorry.
record.
Jesse Adams, I live at 3643 Hastings Avenue in Winston-Salem.
Thank you.
And first of all, I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in opposition to this. And I'd like to acknowledge the fact that you folks probably know more about this situation than I do, the particulars as such. And I do also want to state that I do not have anything against the petitioners in this case. In fact, I know where they're coming from. Admittedly, this property served a useful purpose long years ago, when this area was not as developed as it is today. That useful purpose no longer exists, and neither does the need for another auto repair garage in our neighborhood. I am sure you're aware of all the businesses in this area, as well as several automobile dealerships. We do not need more of the same. I say all that to say this. I have been told that the proposed new Southeast Area Plan will state that all non-conforming property in the area will be zoned for low-intensity business. Now, I know that's not in effect yet, but I think that the Planning Board is going to recommend that to you. That would eliminate this request up front. Because of the contamination, I'm not sure of the value of this particular piece of property or what it may be used for. But I do believe in time and with a lot of prayer, something good will come from this issue. Recently, the Salvation Army asked for a permit to build something similar to a halfway house on South Main Street, right across from the old nitty-gritty. And after hearing the concerns of those living in that area, the Salvation Army heard and withdrew their request. This, to me, was a very admirable thing to do. Now, in closing, let me say that I have a job at my church that requires me to consider a lot of requests. The first thing I do as I consider any request is determine the effect it may have on other people. With that philosophy in mind, I would like to remind you that over 200 people signed petitions opposing this request. So I simply ask that you, out of respect, hear all of these people and respect this zoning request and vote no on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jill Reich.
My name is Jill Wright, 3330 Conoak Drive. Good evening, council members and Mayor Joines. I agree with everything my neighbors have said concerning this. My husband and I both oppose this as well. The reasons for are looking at the future of Conoak Hills. My husband and I moved to Conoak Hills in 2010. We did extensive renovations on our home, which had previously been a rental. Many of the homes in Conoak Hills are turning over and will continue as the neighbors are aging out. We want our neighborhood to continue to be an attractive place for families and homeowners. And we don't feel that this type of business, it will be attractive. Especially with the addition of sidewalks on Clemmonsville Road. A lot of folks now are using those, and so we would hope that a more pedestrian type business that would be beneficial to the neighborhood would go there. It's unfortunate. I know we can't pick what goes there, but we would hope that it would be some business like that, and not auto repair. As everyone has said, there are multiple of those around in the area. I think that's all I had to say, but please take into consideration all the neighbors.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard in opposition to this proposed rezoning? Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Sally Hirsch, and I'm at 1831 Brantley Street, and I live in Ardmore, and I'm here to support my friends and be in opposition to this. I'm hearing that we don't need more of the same, and I have solar panels on my house. I have an electric car. I'm not polluting the air, and I'm not putting oil into anything anymore. And I'm one of the few houses that does this, but it's the future. It's what's coming, and so I would hope that you would consider that. It's coming across the country, and it'll be here shortly. So please consider that we don't need more of the same, and we need to clean up what we've done. So there are neighbors on the street corners around there, and they're looking at that, and they're living, and you supported with your votes tonight to protect the dead. Now let's support the living. Thank you.
Anyone else like to be heard in opposition? All right, the proponents would have 3 minutes for rebuttal if you would like to add anything.
All right, it was to my understanding that the plan recommends the following, and this is the South Suburban Area Plan updated 6-8, that the property is recommended to be rezoned to a special use zoning, which is exactly what we're trying to do, to enable conditions to be added to help improve the compatibility, and it is very compatible since this is what it was used for previously, of the property and the adjacent residential uses. And also an increase in auto repair is, it's a good thing because there's a need for it. There's not many more people buying it, so there is more of a need for repair in repair shops. The congestion, there are about 3 or 4 around a 5-mile radius, is not more than 7. The waste, it's not a contaminated wasteland, so the state is doing all it can to remediate this, and it is my understanding that they are not willing to put more money into it. So as private investors, as on properties is willing to put money into it and make the property value increase, not decrease. Let's see, the intersection, it is already high in high intensity. People go through that road. People travel through that road. So it's better to put money into it and not wait for somebody else to come in several years later and try. So the character of the community, we did try. We tried so hard to get the community on board with the plan. We had a survey planned out. It was there were several members who were actually trying to voice their opinion but weren't able to do so because of other members of the community. The contamination, all cars leak on every road. So we dispose of everything that we use at the car dealership, at the place. We dispose of it properly. So remediation is underway, and the state is doing all it can. So they're just remediating every 6 months. Anything else that we can do, we're trying to invest into this property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak on the rebuttal? All right. The opponents would have 3 minutes for rebuttal if you'd like to add anything.
I'm not going to try to rebut anything that the lady just spoke about. I simply want to say that we have viewed 2 of their businesses already in operation. And from what we see, and we being the over 200 people that signed the petitions, what we have seen, we do not want that kind of business in our neighborhoods. Short, sweet, and simple. And, you know, I'm again appealing to you on behalf of all the people that live around this, and we're asking that this not be allowed to happen. And like I said, you know, I don't know the value of this property. I don't know what's going to ever become of it, but because of the contamination. But there again, you know, that's in the future, as the lady just spoke of. So again, I just ask that you not allow this to happen. We would rather see a vacant lot there than to have another garage in our area. There's already, I think, about 4 or 5 within a 5-block area, and I pointed out that we also have several automobile dealerships in the area. So far as the need that she's talking about, there is no need there for any of this. So again, I ask you, consider the neighbors.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for the opposition on rebuttal? All right, seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed and ask Mr. Norby to give the presentation of the planning board.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You see here the map showing the property in question there, southwest corner of Conoak and Clemmonsville Road. And you see on the immediate map there that it is all surrounded by RS9 zoning. So this map is going out 1.5 blocks to the east and 2 blocks to the west, about 1.5 blocks to the north, and a couple blocks to the south. There is other non-residential zoning about 2 blocks away to the west, or to the east, excuse me, and then another, that's commercial zoning, and then another couple blocks to the west there is office zoning in that area. The draft South Suburban Area Plan update that you will be getting in a couple of, and not this next month, but following month, that came from the planning board is showing this case. You can see the red with a blue B there. That is shown and as a recommendation for, it is currently zoned residential because it was built prior to annexation and zoning by the city. So it goes back many decades before zoning came along. So it developed as a gas station as a non-conforming use. When they discovered leakage from the gas tanks there, the gas station had closed down. They went through the remediation with the state. It took long enough that they were out of operation for more than a year. They lost their legal non-conforming status, and so now with a new proposed owner, they would like to establish at least part of the business back, not the gas station part, but the auto repair. So the area plan wasn't taken into consideration this specific zoning case, but what it was saying was that since that was a non-residentially built property, it would make some sense to zone it for some type of non-residential use that would be neighborhood serving. And the specific condition, as you heard in some of the testimony, is a property is recommended in the area plan to be rezoned to a special use zoning district to enable conditions to be added to help improve the compatibility of the property and adjacent residential uses. This property, as well as some others, are situated in such a fashion that rezoning to a low-intensity commercial or office zoning district would be the most suitable land recommendation for these properties. And it also recommended do not expand any non-residential zoning to adjacent properties. Now, if you look at the at where the case is being highlighted, there's a solid black line around the site. Part of it is shown red, which is the service station property. Part of it on the west is yellow, and that is a residentially zoned property. So what you see here is the present service station property. This is looking at the residential lot that is in between that station and the house you see to the right. So that is also zoned RS9 there. This is looking down to the south on Conoak, and then this is looking behind the structure on the south side of the property. This is looking to the west along Clemmonsville Road, so that's looking across that vacant residential lot toward the house to the west. This is looking across Clemmonsville Road, and then this is looking to the east across Conoak Drive. So you see the immediate situation around there. When they originally brought the site plan to the planning board for their May 11th hearing, they were showing, the building is shown in kind of that peach color, and then they were showing a new parking lot to be constructed with 4 parking spaces that actually cross that blue dashed line into that additional residential lot. The staff recommended that they pull that parking lot back so that no part of that was on that residential lot. And as you can see, the rest of the residential lot was proposed for a buffer and also a fence along the property line. So the staff recommended that the petitioner pull the parking lot back and let that lot be only used for a buffer. And actually the petitioner agreed to that and revised their site plan to show a smaller parking lot that is closer into the building itself. I already explained the first couple of bullets there, and that the applicant wants to reestablish at least the use of auto repair. The existing building would be retained and not expanded. The request includes conditions regarding lighting, so a lighting intensity limitation. Signage, now it does, one of the conditions allows for a single monument sign that is 6 foot high and no more than 36 square feet. I heard the representative petitioner say a little bit ago that they were only going to attach it to the building. So if that is what they really want to do, then they may want to revise that condition. There will be no exterior storage of inoperative motor vehicles or motor vehicles that are under repair. That has certainly been an issue with other auto repair places around town, but they have agreed to a condition that would not allow that storage, and that there would be no improvements on that side lot with the exception of the proposed buffer yard there. So those are the additional conditions that were put on there. The request is generally consistent with the recommendation of the existing area plan, and the proposed new area plan has more restrictive language than the existing area plan that was adopted back in 2011. At the May 11th Planning Board public hearing, there were 3 citizens who spoke against, citing much of what you heard tonight, incompatibility with the immediately surrounding single family and not wanting another auto repair business in the area. The planning board discussed, and although it wasn't a unanimous opinion, the majority felt like it was reasonable to rezone given the limitations of the site for reuse for residential purposes, and given that it's past use, and the site plan does meet UDO requirements.
Thank you. Questions of Mr. Dorby? All right, Councilmember, Mr. Taylor had asked to speak before. Do you want to go ahead and make your comments before Councilmember McIntosh asks his questions?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is one of the rare times on the zoning case that I've been somewhat perplexed. I actually prayed to God for wisdom on what to do in this matter, because I think that the planning staff, I think that the petitioners, and I think that the neighborhood are all right at the same exact time. We had a meeting on June 22nd, and both sides came together in a peaceful manner and laid out their concerns, the pros and cons of why this makes sense. And on one side, I do think that the business owner, Mr. Azam, I think this makes sense. I think it is a decent use for the community. I've seen some of the work that you've done on Walltown Street, and it makes sense because of the previous use there in that location. However, I think the neighbors also have a legitimate concern with, some things that might be in the ground, with some of the uses that it might bring to the community, and I do understand their concerns. But I'm sort of concerned what happens if we don't approve this particular rezoning. We do know that the site does have a level of contamination, and I don't know if this site will ever be used again for residential. I don't know if it will ever be used for anything of a restaurant nature. So I'm reminded just down, I think Mr. Adams mentioned the nitty-gritty. I mean, I'm reminded of this particular building where there was concerns at the nitty-gritty, and the neighbors came out. We ended up putting some sanctions on nitty-gritty, and the place ended up closing down. And I sort of warned them against that because I was concerned that it would be a haven for broken windows and graffiti. And sure enough, nitty-gritty left, and for well over a year, maybe even 2, it looked like a wreck. and it actually looked like it was possibly bringing down the property values of the neighbors who are around. Now, Dollar General has come along, and I think it's starting to pick back up, but I'm concerned about this site the same way. What happens if we don't approve it? However, I think the wise thing to do at this point is to not believe that I'm smarter than the neighbors who I represent. So I respect the business owner. I think, you know, you're a good guy. You've got a great character witness, and I've seen the work that you do. I support the neighbors in this particular situation. You have to live here. Even though I'm a native son of this community, I attended school over by you. I don't live particularly in that neighborhood, even though I represent it. So your voice carries the weight. I think, Mr. Zam, you are a good business owner. I know you'll find another place to go if this is not approved. And I want to support you, but I just can't do it in this way. So I'll put a motion on the floor. I know there's additional discussion that needs to be had. Councilmember Larson also attended that community meeting. And at the end of the day, it was well attended. And what I always do is we allow everybody to speak. We allow the planning staff to speak. And I just put it up for up or down vote. Every hand in the community meeting was up when I asked pretty much who did not want this in their community. And I think the neighbors respect the property owner, but I just cannot support it at this particular time. So I move for denial of W-331 and approval of the statement of consistency for denial of said item.
Second. Second. All right, several people have asked to speak, beginning with Councilmember McIntosh.
My question was about the status of the remediation. We've heard a couple things about it. Do we know definitively where that is, what level it is?
I think the petitioner will need to speak to that. We're not in the regulatory end of that, and I understand that's been working through the state, but I don't. They can probably speak better than I can to that.
The petitioner, I'll give him a chance to speak on it. If you state your name and address
Yes,
for
sir.
the record.
My name is Kazazam. I'm the address 2214 Cole Road, Winston-Salem. I'm the manager for Azam Properties. The remediation, as far as that's why we proceeded to move forward with this plan. The state dug up 30 feet into the ground, removed all the bad dirt, and brought in brand new dirt, and wanted to keep monitoring it. As far as we know, one of the reports came back, the groundwater was contaminated. So further down, they said, go ahead, we don't want any more digging. They have several wells placed along the properties that will continuously monitor it. But no more digging is allowed. They don't want to do any more digging. They said, go ahead, you can put concrete or asphalt and go ahead and continue. Whatever business gets approved, we have no problem with it. The only thing they want to keep monitoring is the groundwater. It is contaminated, but the state wants to get it cleaned up naturally. So the process for that, as far as the information that I was given by the owners, could take up from anywhere from 10 to 15 years to clean up naturally. As far as any other work being done to the property, the state doesn't want no more digging. Wells to be the wells they place, they don't want them to be tampered with. As long as the building or the wells don't get tampered with, they say go ahead, we can operate whatever business the city allows us to.
Thank you.
Okay, quick follow-up on that. So where are the monitoring wells on the property?
There's several placed all around the building and the lot, and some even go into other residential lots to monitor whichever way, the groundwater or something's contaminated. But the state said, they're monitoring. I think there's an environmental company in charge of it, so they abide by state laws, and whatever the state requires, that's what we have to abide with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Bessie?
I had a question about the area plan. Ms. Norby, you noted that the South Suburban Area Plan, in your interpretation, was favorable to this kind of reuse in existing non-conforming uses. Basically, does the language of the plan speak to existing uses, existing non-conforming uses?
The language of the plan addressed those areas, those specific sites that were either zoned or used for business. In this case, it wasn't zoned, but it had been used. What the plan does not get into is specific uses or specific zoning categories. And I think that's a matter of interpretation here, because what they're requesting here is a GBS zoning category, which is a fairly intense commercial zoning category. We we were thinking about PB when they first came in to talk to us, but the problem is because of the PB standards, design standards in terms of parking being to the side or the rear, the building being pulled up the street, it couldn't meet that. So the next best thing for the use they were talking about, if they wanted to get it rezoned, was GB. I think that's a matter of judgment, is whether that particular use is too intense for that definition that's in the plan. The plan simply says they're in such a fashion that rezoning to a low-intensity commercial or office zoning district would be the most suitable land use recommendation for these properties, and that conditions should be added to improve the compatibility of the property and adjacent residential uses. So that is why, even though we went with the GB, we wanted to see these additional conditions about the uses that I went over in the presentation. But it is ultimately the judgment of the council as to whether that's too intense or not.
And a related question, in the testimony during the planning board hearing, the reference was made to the site as having not been used for this use for at least 6 or 7 years. Do you have any data on how long it's been unused for the kind of use that's being requested?
I think during I saw somewhere in here where we were talking it was 2013 or 2014. So it's been several years that it has been unused, but it's more like 3 or 4 years from now rather than 6 or 7.
Do you have any specific information that it was used as a gas station that recently?
It was used as a Texaco gas station and auto repair when the last area plan was being done. So it was being used at that time.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes, from the standpoint of the exact date, we do not know. Before Mr. Azam came in, we met with Mr. Craver, who's the trustee for they are the property owner currently, unless the property has been transferred over the last several months. We did not worry about the specific date because Mr. Craver admitted that it had been closed 3 or 4 years, so we did not go back and actually research the exact date of closure.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. A couple of comments. I think that, as Mr. Norby's pointed out, there's a real question of interpretation for what the area plan intended in this kind of case. I suspect that when most people would read the language of the plan, they'd be thinking of an actual existing use as opposed to a historic use on the site. And in this case, when you're talking about a use that has not existed for some years, and the question is how many years, that when you look at the surrounding existing uses, they're all residential. It would be essentially a spot zoning, and for a pure commercial use of this nature that does not really serve the neighborhood, it's not a pedestrian-friendly kind of use. I question whether that's the type of thing that the folks who were involved in the plan actually anticipate. In terms of the contamination, based on my previous experience on Environmental Management Commission at the state level, my impression is that if you've got an old gas station, you've probably got groundwater contamination. And in this case, if they've dug up the tanks and the soil, they've done everything they can. Based on what we're told about the site, I think that's a wash here. I don't see any reason why that would be prohibitive of another type of business in this location, or a severe threat to the surrounding areas, provided there's not some renewal of the contamination. But I agree. While it's a judgment call, I'm not convinced that this is really the best place to reinstate a use that existed on the site before the residential area grew up around it, but it's really not compatible with the adjacent uses anymore.
Councilor Montgomery?
A couple questions and comment. In reference to the existing use, ability to be used on the property itself, Mr. Norby, what can be done there today?
Councilmember Montgomery, it is currently zoned RS9. So the only uses that would be allowed would be those uses that are in your agenda attachments there. There's a page that says existing RS9 uses allowed. So theoretically, any of those uses you see listed, if they can fit that property, it could be done. There may be some, certainly residential is not likely given the history of contamination on the site. We haven't asked the state specifically about this site, but there have been other sites that have been similarly contaminated, and the state has told those folks that residential is definitely not a possibility there. So I would discount the possibility of residential uses, but there are other non-residential uses such as churches, police or fire stations, libraries, some types of schools. You have concentrations of people there, but still, those are uses that are allowed in their park and shuttle lot. So kind of a limited range of uses that the RS9 would allow without it being rezoned.
So essentially anything that would actually accommodate the lower intensity would require some type of rezoning for the property itself, which would include the conversation and dialogue that's taking place now with the community and their engagement within that process. I too feel in the sense that there's a tug and pull in reference to this in terms of those who are looking to do something, as well as the righteous concerns from the neighborhood. One thing I do have a question on, and that is just there was a statement made in reference to existing properties that the petitioners have now and the conditions of those properties. Can anyone speak to that? As much as I likely support the motion, that's something I at least want some clarity on, just for the basis of ensuring that we're clear on how those properties existing are actually kept.
We own, specifically on Watown Street and Clemmonsville Road, we own two. One has never had that kind of problem. We did have to get it change of use, but never rezoning. The other one is near Clemmonsville Road. It had the same problem, but it's always been HB. So, but the tanks were removed. Same scenario. Once the state gave the green light, once we know there will be no more digging and just the wells can be monitored, they allow us to go ahead and operate a business there. So,
but do you know the addresses of those?
3000 Clemmonsville Road, sir.
And I only asked that question because it was the statement made of conditions of property, and so if they're well kept, then I think we should speak to the fact that they're kept, but it just does not coincide with the neighborhood would desire to see. My last comment would be to the neighborhood. When I first came on this council, one of the first zoning cases that we had was in reference to a property that individuals in the neighborhood were adamantly against seeing rezoned because they thought that it should have a different use. And I very much supported the neighbors in reference to not seeing that property rezoned. Today, that property still has not been redeveloped. It was a store. It is no longer a store anymore. It's closed. And the neighbors now have to deal with the vacancy of that. And the developer found another piece of property to do exactly what they wanted without having to come through a rezoning process. So I say that to say that sometimes there are a slippery slope that happens within that process.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I guess to Mr. Zahn, I admire your entrepreneurial spirit, and I appreciate the work that you've spent in looking at this site. I am a historic preservationist. I like old buildings, and I like to see buildings adaptively reused. And I applaud your effort to think about that. I do have one technical question, maybe for our legal counsel, and that is, are we able to impose under zoning the requirement that a building will not change, and that if that building is destroyed by some chance, fire, storm, whatever, the zoning that is in place will allow a subsequent building to be built on that site that may or may not meet the same requirements? If I'm hearing correctly from Mr. Norby, that one of the dictates or one of the requirements of this approval is that they will make no changes to the footprint or the size of this building, or anything else on the lot. Would this go in perpetuity on the site, and can we in fact enforce that? That's a question that may be a moot point, because I'm not going to be voting for this. I don't know how the council is, but we'll work through that. My real question revolves around the question of grandfathering, or maybe we should say grandmothering. The idea that somehow, at some point in time, we decided that for the best interest of the surrounding area, that a particular activity was not going to be acceptable. And in this particular case, you have a gas station located in the middle of a neighborhood, and the decision was made probably before, maybe as soon as zoning was imposed on the site, that in the long term, that function, that use would disappear. And that people for years have bought houses, invested in the neighborhood. We've heard of examples of that. And around the premise that grandfathering in fact worked, and that they could count on a function that would be removed later for the betterment of their neighborhood. In this particular case, what we've got now is a real question of whether we're going to grandfather sites or not. We have a Clemmonsville road that is in transition right now. We have pods of commercial development on either end. And what we see with this particular application is the question of, are we going to give priority to residential neighborhood protection, or are we going to allow the gradual creep of commercial development? Not simply even on the grandfathered lot, but on the lot that's adjacent to it, which even all of our planning documents say we should not be doing, that we should not allow this residential property to transfer. So it's complex by even that case. There is environmental concerns that need to be taken care of. The contaminants have spread 200 feet or so beyond the property lines, and what that means, I don't know. But the conveyance of this property to another property owner, the development of activities on this site may in fact just ultimately complex the whole situation of a potential cleanup that still is yet to be resolved in my mind. The idea then really for me is, within the idea of protecting our neighborhoods, and particularly ones that are in transition and are under siege at their perimeters, this is an important site for that. And as long term, it's a question of, are we going to keep Clemmonsville Road as a neighborhood, or are we going to allow it to gradually erode into a series of commercial developments that we've seen so much in so many other parts of the city? In this particular instance, I will be supporting the neighborhoods on it. Thank you.
Mr. Adam?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm not going to repeat what everyone else has said, but I stand with the neighborhood. I think they know that. For me, have a problem, and most of you have heard me say this for years now, that in the urban core of the city, that, encroachment is becoming, whereas when I was growing up, we didn't see as many service stations and garages and auto repair places, because they were built according to the neighborhood and the need. Right now, what we did with downtown Winston-Salem, rethinking what we wanted to do there to create this city where it's sustainable, it's innovative, it's welcoming, try to make it as green as we could. But we now have to transfer this over to our neighborhoods, and we've got to stand with that. The way Winston-Salem is now, we have more auto repair shops, tire buying, whatever you want to call it, in the urban core, and particularly in the transitional neighborhoods, but more importantly in the poorer neighborhoods. And that's not fair, because the poor folks pay taxes just like all the rest of us. And if we can't protect them and stand with them, then maybe some of us don't need to be here in some of these seats. And I'm not talking about the council, I'm talking about from the top down. The issue also I have is that we're finding now, when people want to develop things in the urban core, the poor neighborhoods, to try to revitalize or create economic development, we got all this hazardous contamination and things that keep the people from coming. So now we're in a position where as our people are saying, hey, we want what downtown has. We want what the west side has. We want what the suburbia areas have. But they don't know that most of the time we can't do anything because once a developer or person that wants to do something in a community, they do their research and they find out that there was a cleaners there. There was a uniform clean place. There was a furniture prep place. There was textile. And now we're stuck, whereas we can't create the same revitalization that we've created all over our city. Again, I know an area plan, people talk about our area plan. Some say we got too much, too little. But area plan is the plan that we work off of. It's a work in process. That's what it does, is ideas of what we want it to be. But that doesn't mean that we can't change it along the way. But for me and mine, and you guys will be hearing more about our urban core and some of the businesses that we have in certain neighborhoods that we don't need anymore. We need to concentrate on what we need versus what we already have. I'm standing with the neighborhood on this, and I think they already know that, because you don't stand with the people that vote for you, then you'll get what you got. So I'll be supporting Councilmember Taylor's motion.
Councilmember Clark and Councilmember Burke.
Okay. I'll be real quick. First off, Mr. Taylor is the councilman of the area, and Mr. Larson's right across the street. And I will stand with their opinion. They know their neighborhoods better than anybody in supporting your motion. But I do want to talk a little bit about contaminated areas. Mr. Taylor, the reason you had such a hard time with this, there is no answer.
Right.
Once you have been stigmatized with contamination, it's ruined. This property has no value, and I don't think it ever will. Who wants to tell their kids to go out the back door and go play in the contaminated soil? Who wants to go down? Let's go eat at the restaurant down the street that's built on top of the hazardous waste site. Ms. Burke is dealing with that issue. I think it's Haynes and Lawrence are the two schools in question. That groundwater contamination actually happened across the street, kind of up the street a little bit. Ms. Adams just mentioned cleaners. Oftentimes there are issues there. But once you have this designation, I don't care if you put a brownfield or whatever, it has no value. And this lot's very, very small. If you look at it, I don't think you're going to get much commercial development on it. And I wonder what the school system is going to do with two schools that nobody wants. And it gets even bigger than that. The poor neighbors, either around this site or where Ms. Burke has, the law requires you, when you sell your property, to disclose any specific item, major items. And so people in your neighborhood are going to have to disclose it. Underneath my house is contaminated water. And that may make it even hard to sell the houses. And there is no answer to this. I don't know what it is. I can tell you, if you go around this town, you can find a lot of old filling stations. I do know of a couple of cleaners where what is going to happen, this house is going to, or building will gradually deteriorate. The windows will get boarded up and whatever. But I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but I don't know the answer to this. And Ms. Adams alluded to it also about it's just kind of a permanent scarlet letter on the property. And I don't know what the answer is, but it is a real problem, particularly in older neighborhoods where there were old factories and people used to pour the stuff out the back door. I will tell you, I do rent a major facility in another city, and our land was contaminated by the previous owner, and we finally got a clean bill of health from the state after 30 years of it. It was mentioned, I'm not sure who said it, that over time, Mother Nature will take care of it, but sometimes it takes a long, long time. I will say the only ray of hope I will give you on Polo Road in Mr. McIntosh's ward, I think it is, or Miss Adams again, excuse me. Yeah. There is an old filling station that they're making into a kind of a bar, maybe a little restaurant. I'm not sure what they're doing there. That's the only success I've ever seen. But I just comment to you, as you drive around this town, you can find all sorts of old filling stations that just, there is no answer. And somehow we as city leaders have to come up with that answer.
Councilor Burke.
Thank you. I've always admired citizens' participation, because if you don't take care of your neighborhood, no one else will. But I want you to know that this young entrepreneur, I want to tell you how much I admire and appreciate you. And the young woman who made the presentation, you did very well. When Mr. Montgomery asked you a question concerning what Mr. Adams had mentioned about the condition, the site, I don't believe that you clarified it enough for him. Your places of business should be businesses that you feel good about. And you talked about the rezoning and what you did, but you do have presentable places. Am I to understand that? And we have young folks in this city who wants to do something. I say thank you. When we look at the Haynes Lawrence, that is a problem because the neighborhoods people are working. And there's a lot of folks who meet about it. It's something that we really seem like we can't get a hold on and do anything about. We get reports that, as Mr. Turner, who's been meeting with us, that it is safe. Some of the people thought when they were talking about the groundwater, it was the drinking water. We let them know. We've had the people from the state to look at it. I have disagreed with some of the folks from the state because I feel they're more concerned about the welfare of the private people who own it than our state dollars paying for their jobs to give us the right kind of report. So that is an issue. I had a young woman to move on Glen, and Ms. Highsmith talked about their neighborhood, and this young woman who moved on Glen, she wanted to go there to revitalize it, but because of absentee landlords moving in areas where there are solid housing, when you don't have progressive people like you, then they take over the neighborhood. And when people can stand up for their neighborhoods, it is to be something that we admire. But I want this young man to understand this clearly. I believe in progress. I believe that people ought to develop and make money and create atmospheres. And I hope what we've said here this evening will not take away. I was going to buy some property, and I went out to look at this property. The price was good. And when I looked at the property, I called the man. I said, were you blind at night when you bought that? He says, I'm a broker. I buy a lot of stuff that's not any good. So I wondered, why did you even buy that piece of property? I think if you'd done a little more research background and had a little more contact with the residents, you probably would have said no. And that's all I want to say. But again, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. We do have a motion on the floor to deny this rezoning. All those in favor of the motion to deny the rezoning, please vote yes. And those who are against the motion, please vote no.
I don't have it. We haven't shown it. It hasn't shown up yet.
We need to see the words. There you go.
So we'll think that says it doesn't happen.
Vote yes.
Huh?
You want to vote yes?
Motion's still.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The motion to deny the rezoning passes unanimously. Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. Okay, item Z3.
Item Z3, public hearing on zoning petition of CCC Gallery Lofts LLC and CCC Gallery Lofts 2 LLC from PBS MPB to CIL, property located on the west side of Chestnut Street between 6th Street and 7th Street and on the southwest corner of 6th Street and Chestnut Street, located in the East Ward. Planning Board recommended approval of the petition and approval of the site plan with staff recommendations. City Council remanded this item to the Planning Board at its April 3rd, 2017 meeting.
Is there anyone, Council Chairman, who is opposed to this rezoning? I know the petitioner's here if there are any questions. Seeing no opposition, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Mr. Norby, would you perhaps review the changes that have been made in this since the last meeting?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go through this very quickly. You see the property there shown in yellow. It includes the little triangular property to the south that is currently a little dog park that is basically owned by the developer. It's in the downtown plan in the mixed use area, and these are some shots of the property right there. This is the northern edge of the property that would be still developable, and this is looking at the surroundings. Of course, that site now is being developed into a mixed use development with a parking deck included, and that's just catty corner from this site here. And this is the art space school immediately to the north. As you can see, the color's a little faint. It's adjacent to both CI, that's Central Industrial Zoning, that most of the Innovation Quarter is in, and the light blue is the CB district. Both of those districts very, very similar to each other in this. They're asking for the same zoning here. I think the issue when this came to the planning board was a number of the residents of the property, as well as a few others, were concerned about what was going to happen with parking. And although the planning board initially recommended that, it came forward to the council remanded it back because the petitioner decided they would go with CIL so that they could put some conditions in there about parking. So what ended up, after a number of attempts at discussion with the residents, were two proposed conditions that went to the planning board this last time. One was that there would be a requirement that they would have to meet the parking requirements of the PB zoning district, that was the previous zoning district that they had there. And there would be a 60-foot height limit on any new building that was going to be there. So that would limit the amount of new residences that could be done. So with those conditions on there, it went to the planning board in June, and a number of residents came and said they supported the conditions that were added and felt that addressed their concerns. They wanted to make sure that they were adhered to, and there was some discussion during that time, and with that, the planning board recommended approval.
All right. Questions, Mr. Norby? All right, thank you. I would recognize Councilman Montgomery for a motion, if he's ready.
Yep. I move for approval of 1W-3322 and 2, the statement of consistency for approval of said item.
Second.
Motion and second. Okay. Councilmember Adams?
Yes, I don't know whether this is Mr. Norby or the council member of the ward. I did know there was some concerns and issues from some community groups that have long been a part of the development over there, such as the Gola CDC and some others. Have their concerns been satisfied? Are they okay with it?
Speaking with Mr. Suggs from Gola CDC, his concern was specifically around the parking, and from my understanding, they met with developers thereafter, and he was satisfied, particularly with the pieces from the parking. Specifically, the parking piece that was added to that was the PB standards for zoning. For parking, which gives up to a 30% reduction in parking for that. So they have the parking requirement, but they get up to 30% reduction for the parking. And then the other added benefit that I think exists for this particular development is what is currently happening adjacent to the property in reference to the parking deck that will be a part of the new mixed-use development in addition to it. But to that end, that was the concern specifically around the parking piece. One other item that was mentioned was in reference to just in terms of some of the historical things within the neighborhood and the community, but specific to the parking, those issues have been addressed, and I hadn't heard any new concerns after these adjustments from planning.
Councilmember Clark?
Yeah, just real quick, I want to thank everyone involved in this. Mr. Stemmel, I see you sitting back there. The first vote at the planning board was 5-4 to approve it. The last vote was unanimous to approve it. And I think the groups met 3 or 4 times reading the dialogue here, but I think we came up with a win-win, and I think I just want to thank everybody for working through it, and I think it will be a great addition for us down there.
Thanks, Mr. Burke.
I was going to say, when you look at the area, we had some visitors here, and they went to the Bailey Park, and they talked about how beautiful it is the past 2 years and how it's changed so much. When the council person mentioned historical, I would hope, as we have been talking about, to have markers so that we can keep our history. And of course, Gola is a very historical AME Zion, African Methodist Episcopal Church. And Gola, named after the pastor Gola. And Gola also became a bishop for the AME Zion people. And so as we were talking, the councilwoman and I, with someone not long ago about making sure that our city manager understands clearly, no matter who's coming in here, that our history, we have torn so much of it up, but it will be reserved and put in its proper place. So that is a very good point, and we should make sure this is documented the right way.
Very good. We have a motion and a second on the floor to approve this rezoning. Those in favor of the rezoning, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, please vote no. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Councilman Montgomery. Councilman Montgomery, yes.
Just for a point of order, I don't know
showed
if
you
we
without
can
the
get these
motion.
things rectified on the back end of who made the motion and who seconded the motion for the minutes anyway.
Yeah, I hope we can clear that up. It certainly needs to be the council person from the ward making those zoning motions here. Yeah, it's showing it correctly there, but it did come up a little bit wrong a minute ago. All right, let's move on to Z4.
Item Z4, public hearing on ordinance amending Chapter B, Article 4 of the Unified Development Ordinances to amend the historic overlay regulations to include additional small towns within Forsyth County. UDO 277, proposed by Planning and Development Services, recommended by the Planning Board and Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee.
Mr. Norby, you want to just touch briefly on this UDO, what this proposes before we have the public hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is basically for the benefit of the small towns in the county and the county, which actually wants to follow the footsteps of the city with the recent architectural update that was done here, followed by the book that you all have celebrated there in the last couple of years. And the county would like to do something similar to that in cooperation with the small towns. And most of the small towns in the county have agreed to participate financially in that, but they would like to seek grant funding from the state, which offers them to what's called certified local governments. The city of Winston-Salem is a certified local government, Forsyth County is, but the small towns are not. And the state's rules for doing that are that, well, those small towns need to be part of the Historic Resources Commission. So what this is it doesn't change the membership, the total membership of the Historic Resources Commission. It doesn't change at all the city's appointments. It changes the structure of the county's appointments to allow for appointments from Bethania, Louisville, Rural Hall, and Walkertown. We already have Kernersville and Clemmons with members to that, but that would add these small towns which have agreed to be part of it. So the language is just simply allowing a representative from each of them to be part of the county delegation on the HRC, and then it's a change in the purpose statement to keep us up to date with the current state enabling language. So this was reviewed at the Community Development Housing General Government Committee in June. It went to the Planning Board. It was recommended for approval in May, and then the County Commissioners took it up last month and actually approved this at their July 13th meeting.
Okay, any questions, Mr. Norby? All right, thank you. This is a public hearing. Does anyone, the council chairman, wishes to be heard on this proposed UDO text amendment? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed, and I recognize Councilman Montgomery, who is the chairman of our Community Development Housing and General Government Committee, who heard this item.
I move for approval of UDO-277, including the statement of consistency.
Second. All right. All those in favor of the motion to approve this UDO, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, indicate by voting no. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 5.
Item Z5, Mayor joins recommendations for appointments and reappointments to boards and commissions. Recreation and Parks Commission, Sean Hawkins appointment, Kathy Gondring appointment, and John Gunkel appointment, all with terms expiring May 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Not those in favor of the motion approving these appointments, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, vote no. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next.
Winston-Salem Forsyth County Utility Commission, Reverend Yvonne Hines appointment, term expiring June 2020. Historic, I'm sorry. Can we just vote on that?
Move on.
Councilmember Burt moves approval. Second by Councilmember Adams. All those in favor of this motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed to this motion, please indicate by voting no. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Now, Historic
Resources Commission, Old Salem category, Mary Berry appointment, term expiring June 2020.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Not all those in favor of this motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, vote no. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Historic Resources Commission at large member category, Kristen McManus, reappointment, term expiring June 2021.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Would those in favor of this motion please indicate by voting yes. Anybody opposed, vote no. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
MWBE Advisory Committee.
Council members, without objection, I'd like to hold this item till the next meeting without objection.
All right.
Good. All right. We'll move on then. I guess that's all we have. Council members, we do have a need for a closed session, brief one, and I would recognize Councilmember Clark for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like a 1 minute for
Yeah,
personal
sure.
privilege
Absolutely.
before we
Yes,
start. It has been in the paper in various places about the issues on Northwest Boulevard, and I just want to employ the staff, and you've done a good job of keeping us posted, but to do what we can to expedite opening that road. That road is actually a circular road. People don't realize that we have a lot of roads that come in and out of town. That road actually starts at First Street over near Baptist Hospital, which First Street turns into Stratford Road and Country Club. It crosses Ronaldo Road. It crosses University. You going up, it ends up at 14th, ends up at 52. And it has been closed, and I know that we have an issue trying to get on some property, but I just would encourage you to do all you can because it is a very well-used road that we need to open back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
With that, I would like to make a motion, sir. I move that the City Council go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11A3 to 1, provide instructions to and consult with the city attorney in the matter of Carolyn Hodges versus City of Winston-Salem, 16 CVS 1921, and Sandhills Amusements Incorporated and Gift Surplus LLC versus State of North Carolina, and all 13 CVS 3705, and 2, to preserve the attorney-client privilege. I move that motion.
Motion second. All in favor of the motion to go in closed session, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We'll go into closed session. Thank you. Councilmember Adams, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Councilmember Burke thirded that motion.